morning, Asia. Good evening, America. You are watching World DNA with me, Jyotsna Kumar. Now on the show today, as Israel continues to pound Gaza in the latest, at least 45 Palestinians have been killed as troops engaged in close-quarter combat with Hamas militants. While in the U.S., there has been a shooting at the Arkansas shopping center. We'll get you all the details, but first, a look at the headlines. Post their conviction for exploitation of their household helps Britain's wealthiest family. The Hinda say an appeal has been filed challenging the verdict. Dismissed media reports that any members of the family faces detention. At least 25 killed and 50 injured as Israeli forces shell tent camps in Al-Mawasi adjoining Rafah, says the Gaza Health Ministry. Is the latest of a series of deadly Israeli attacks in the Gaza Strip. As Israel-Hezbollah tensions peak, UN chief warns the people of the region and the world cannot afford Lebanon to become another Gaza. This as Israel and Iran step up the rhetoric. Three people killed, 10 injured as an armed man opens fire at a supermarket in Fordystown in Arkansas State in the U.S. The suspect, who was wounded in a shootout with police, has been arrested. Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to hold meetings with Prime Minister Modi and other Indian leaders today. Hasina is in New Delhi on the first bilateral visit by a foreign leader after Prime Minister Modi began his third term in office. Another Indian competitive exam hit by paper leak claims. Now the CSIR NET exam for science graduates has been postponed. Stringent law enforced to curb malpractice in competitive exams. Quinton de Kock's quick-fire 65 and some quality bowling helped South Africa beat defending champions England by 7 runs in a Super 8 stage clash in St. Lucia. The Proteas are yet to lose a match at the T20 World Cup.
Go back of the length of their unbeaten run in this tournament. Outstanding.
After a Swiss court convicted 4 members of the Hinda family of exploiting Indian staff at their Geneva mansion, Britain's richest family has now issued a statement claiming that they were appalled by the verdict and would take their case to a higher court. Now, the advocates representing the Hindujas issued a statement stating that while their clients have been acquitted of all human trafficking charges, they were appalled and disappointed by the rest of the decisions made in the court of first instance and filed an appeal in a higher court. Until the final judgment, there cannot be detention of the family members. The statement added the lawyers claimed that the plaintiffs had withdrawn their complaints and that the Hindujas were determined to defend themselves.
I'm shocked but obviously relieved that trafficking, which was a total exaggeration, has been ruled out. That said, we have the impression that the same sentence has been handed down even though the trafficking has been ruled out. So we are obviously going to appeal. This is, I would say, a moral judgment, not a legal one, and we're going to fight it all the way.
While Prakash Hindaja and his wife Kamal Hindaja were sentenced to 4 years and 6 months in prison, their son Ajay and his wife Namrata received 4-year term prison sentence for exploitation and illegal employment. A fifth defendant, Najib Ziazi, the family's business manager, received an 18-month suspended sentence. The court has, however, acquitted them on the more serious charge of human trafficking. The indictment claimed that the family brought staff from India, confiscated their passports, and forced them to work long hours for low wages, sometimes as little as $8 a day. The lawsuit also claimed no specific working hours mentioned in the contract. This came after a separate 6-year civil case filed by the staff was settled confidentially. During the trial, prosecutors alleged that the family spent more on their dog than on their servants. The Hinda family denied the allegations, with their lawyers arguing that the workers were treated with respect and their compensation including stay and food. Arguments in their closely watched trial began on June 10th. The lead prosecutor, Yevi Bertosa, claimed that the family had budgeted more for a pet than it had for the salary of one domestic worker, according to reports in the Swiss news media, that is. The Hinda family leads a multinational conglomerate in sectors including automotive manufacturing, information technology, media, power, real estate, and healthcare. With an estimated wealth at $47 billion, the Hinda family has been listed as Britain's richest family. Prakash Hinda and his wife Kamal Hinda, both over 70, did not attend court proceedings, pleading ill health. Their son Ajay and Namrata attended the court proceeding but were not there to hear the verdict. Israel has intensified its onslaught on the Gaza over the last 24 hours. At least 45 Palestinians have been killed as Israeli forces continue to pound Rafah in southern Gaza, as well as other areas across the enclave. Israeli tanks push deeper into western Rafah, firing shells at displaced people's tents in the Al-Mawasi area, which was designated by Israel as a safe haven for displaced Palestinians, killing at least 25 and wounding 50.
During last night, there were random airstrikes. We were saved. Today afternoon, they fired a bomb near the Red Cross. We're located near the Red Cross. My husband ran to check. They fired again near the Red Cross. There were casualties there. People gathered there. I tried to call my husband and he didn't answer. People started to run and someone took us in his car.
The International Committee of the Red Cross said the hospitals were flooded with injured people and casualty numbers spiked. The Red Cross has condemned the firing of high-caliber projectiles which landed just meters away from its office and homes in Gaza. The Israeli military said it was looking into the reported strikes on Al-Mawasi and a separate incident in Gaza, stressing that its forces were conducting precise intelligence-based actions in the Rafah area. It further released a video showing ground troops operating in Gaza and an aerial strike on what it said were Hamas targets. According to Israeli army, the videos show troops locating weapons in a university, eliminating armed militants, and destroying infrastructure by soldiers of the 99th Division, who are operating in the area of the central Gaza Strip corridor. The Israeli army said that 2 of its soldiers were killed in the combat in central Gaza. Hamas also released footage of what they said were militants targeting an Israeli army base. Now, in the footage, mostly shot from the militants' point of view, rockets can be seen fired at what Hamas said was an Israeli army base. Meanwhile, the United Nations on Friday said that it is Israel's responsibility to restore public order and safety in the Palestinian territory so that the humanitarian aid can be delivered. Now, this comes after the Israeli military announced an 11-hour tactical pause daily. However, UN spokesperson Farhan Haq has said that along with fighting between Israel and Hamas, the risk of crime had effectively prevented humanitarian access to critical areas, including Kerem Shalom. Meanwhile, Qatar's Prime Minister said his country is continuing mediation efforts to bridge the gap between Israel and Hamas. Qatar, the United States, and Egypt have been engaged in months of negotiations around details of a ceasefire in Gaza. Now, at least 3 people are dead and 10 wounded as a man carrying a gun opened fire at a grocery store in South Arkansas in the U.S. The shooter was wounded in a gun battle with police and has been arrested. Now, Arkansas State Police said that the shooting took place at the Mad Butcher grocery store in Fordyce City, located 104 kilometers south of Little Rock. Among the injured are 2 law enforcement officers. Eyewitness video captured the sound of gunshots after a shooter opened fire at the supermarket.
Unfortunately, we can confirm that 11 innocent civilians were shot and 3 of those are deceased. 2 law enforcement officers were injured in the exchange of gunfire. The suspect was also shot and taken into custody. The injuries to the officers and the suspect are not considered life-threatening. The remaining civilian injuries range from non-life-threatening to extremely critical.
Footage showed multiple local and state agencies responding to the scene and at least 1 medical helicopter landing nearby. Arkansas Governor took to social media X and said, and I'm quoting here, "I have been briefed on this tragic shooting in Fortis, and I'm in constant contact with state police at the scene. I'm thankful to law enforcement and first responders for their quick and heroic action to save lives." Injuries to civilians range from non-life-threatening to extremely critical. The wounded police officers and the suspect are said to be out of danger. Almost 5,000 people have died in the U.S. gun violence so far this year. The U.S. Supreme Court has upheld a 30-year-old federal law preventing people accused of committing domestic abuse from possessing a firearm. This was a complete reversal of a district court ruling that had cited the prohibition as a violation of the Second Amendment. The Supreme Court in its ruling observed that an individual who poses a credible threat to physical safety of another individual must be disarmed temporarily, consistent with the Second Amendment. Chief Justice John Roberts rejected the case, which pertains to a Texas man, Zaki Rahimi, who was indicted in 2021 for knocking out his girlfriend when police recovered firearms and ammunition from his home. The case was the first involving domestic abusers that came before the top American court over gun rights. Earlier, the case went through the lower court, where conservatives hold a 6-3 majority that favored loosening the gun restrictions. The ruling had left lower courts struggling to determine whether gun restrictions before them are consistent with the history and traditions of firearms. U.S. President Joe Biden hailed the Supreme Court decision in a statement vowing to push for tougher gun restrictions to protect women. He said that ruling will help survivors of domestic violence, while their families will be able to count on critical protections. The ruling marks a major shift in firearm law, prompting numerous legal challenges to federal and state gun regulations. It also serves as directive for lower courts for dealing with gun regulations in the country that date back to late 18th to 19th century.
Charge it from the side, or you can charge it from the rear.
Moving on, the Saudi government has defended its management of the Hajj pilgrimage, this even as the death toll due to heat wave stands at 1,126, with more than half of them from Egypt. 98 of the victims were found to be Indians.
So I was talking about each year we have a large number of Indians visiting Hajj for pilgrimage. This year we have 175,000 Indians who've already visited Hajj. The core Hajj period is from 9th May to 22nd of July, and so far we've lost 98 of our citizens.
In its first response to the deaths, the Saudi government has said it did not fail in ensuring safety of the pilgrims. The authorities have confirmed 577 deaths for the 2 busiest days of Hajj, when pilgrims gathered for hours of prayers in the blazing sun on Mount Arafat, when they participated in the stoning of devil ritual in Mina. Meanwhile, Tunisian President Kais Saied has sacked Religious Affairs Minister after 49 Tunisians lost their lives in this year's Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia. Deaths during the pilgrimage have also been confirmed by Malaysia, India, Jordan, Iran, Senegal, Tunisia, Sudan, and Iraq's autonomous Kurdistan region. Moving on, Tibetan exiles in India's Himachal Pradesh say they are staring at uncertain future over the advancing age of the 14th Dalai Lama, with questions on succession looming large. Tibetans fear that Beijing will try to impose a reincarnation of its choice. Tibetan political leader Penpa Tsering has said that the community has been in talks with over 24 countries to undermine China's stance.
But the selection process will be purely religious, and it will be His Holiness alone who will be responsible, or who will entrust people to look for His reincarnation.
We are scared because He's our Guru. He's everything to us and we're nothing without Him. We pray every day for His long life because we Tibetans have nothing without Him. Without Him, we're nothing.
This comes on the heels of a U.S. delegation's recent visit to India to meet the Dalai Lama. The 7-member group of American lawmakers reiterated support for the Tibetan population in India. Washington diplomats also held China accountable for violating human rights in the Tibetan region. The former Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, was a part of the delegation. The U.S. Congress this month passed a legislation called the Resolve Tibet Act, calling for a peaceful resolution of the dispute over the status and governance of Tibet. It also calls on Beijing to resume dialogue with the Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama. The act empowers the State Department officials to actively and directly counter disinformation about Tibet. It rejects claims of China that Tibet is a part of China since ancient times. The legislation pushes for negotiations without preconditions between the Chinese government and the Dalai Lama or his representatives, or the democratically elected leaders of the Tibetan community. It affirms State Department's responsibility to coordinate for a negotiated agreement. Now we turn our attention to the rising bets in favor of spot crypto funds globally. An exchange-traded fund investing in Bitcoin made its debut on Australia's primary stock market this week, joining a slew of comparable launches in the US and Hong Kong this year. Take a look at this report to understand this new trend, which has taken Wall Street by storm since going live in January. Bets in favor of spot crypto funds have risen exponentially across the globe. First, let's understand what is an ETF, or an exchange-traded fund. ETFs are exactly as the name implies, funds that trade on exchanges, generally tracking a specific index. When you invest in an ETF, you get a bundle of assets you can buy and sell during market hours. This potentially lowers your risk and exposure while helping to diversify your portfolio. Stock indices and gold ETFs are the best examples. The listing of spot US Bitcoin ETFs by large global asset management firms indicate an adoption of the crypto token as mainstream asset. The likes of BlackRock, Fidelity, and Invesco have launched their own spot Bitcoin ETFs. Since making their debut in January, Bitcoin funds have ranked in about $56 billion in assets to date. What is more interesting is the global interest now. The crypto funds are making waves beyond US shores. Hong Kong permitted spot ETFs for Bitcoin and Ether in April, but they have garnered only a fraction of the interest of the US vehicles. South Korea is also lining up to permit crypto funds to list. The latest is Australia, where the VANIC Bitcoin ETF went live on Thursday on the exchange operated by ASX. The fund listed with a seed investment of 985,000 Australian dollars or 657,000 US dollars. The product is a feeder fund for the $647 million VANIC Bitcoin Trust in the US. Separately, Sydney-based BetaShares Holdings and DigiTalks, another local player, are also lining up for the listings on the main stock exchange. Bitcoin has roughly quadrupled since the start of 2023 in a comeback from a deep bear market. The rally reached a record high of $73,798 in March, but the token has slipped back and the momentum has stalled since. Still, the interest by large institutional investors in virtual assets ETFs is pointing to a broader adoption of the largest crypto token. Investors will eye Bitcoin's price action this year to understand the token's stability as a mainstream asset. However, the naysayers continue to remain skeptical of Bitcoin and digital assets. They still believe that the lack of any underlying asset makes Bitcoin a lottery investment vehicle at best and a Ponzi scheme at worst. Business Bureau, WION World is One. Time now to take a look at what is happening in the world of entertainment. Comedy icon Carol Burnett has placed her hands and feet in cement outside TCL Chinese Theatre, having been a part of many iconic projects, including The Carol Burnett Show, Better Call Saul, and Palm Royale. The 91-year-old actor was